Okay, so today I'm going to talk about self-inquiry. And I will begin this video by saying that I do not teach anybody else's definition of anything. I do not teach a philosophy. I do not teach, in fact, I don't teach at all. I just share how awakening is happening in my life and the hooks and the blind spots and the possible mishaps or temporary distractions that can happen as it has played out here in my life. So I am not teaching Advaita Vedanta. I am not teaching the teachings of the Buddha. I am not teaching the teachings of Jesus, although many of them might overlap. I'm just reporting to you the reality of how it has played out here in my life. And there's this, one of the definitions of self-inquiry is to remain in the I am, right? To basically remain in this intense meditation, and therefore all thoughts and feelings dissolve. And that ultimately is a very powerful method, you could say, but in reality, it's not even a method. It's actually the end result of what happens while the momentum of your conditioning dissolves. And when I talk about inquiring into beliefs and understanding the psychological source of a pattern, I don't mean that in the sense of, okay, I understand that something happened in my childhood and therefore I am this way. That's a mental understanding. What I am speaking of is a somatic, in the moment realization that you are actually in the perspective of a 3-year-old when you are in a marriage, a friendship, or any situation where you feel trapped, where you feel that you don't have choices. And when you keep choosing things that don't feel good to you, right? That's not an emotion. That's a pattern that plays out in intimate relationships and in areas that matter to our personality. And as a Western person who interacts very frequently with my family of origin, very frequently with the intimate friendships in my life, very frequently with business, very frequently with the data of the universe, as a Western person, I believe like one of the ways awakenings will express in a slightly different way than maybe some Eastern teachings is that it will transmute the psyche at a very deep level. Some people who are scholars and experts of spirituality, I am not a scholar or an expert. I don't have a memory, basically. I don't really remember things. But people that do study different philosophies and know them well tell me that what I explain is kind of more in alignment with certain Tibetan teachings of actually raising the body-mind into a body of light. And maybe even Jesus Christ may have taught something like that because he resurrected in the body of light. So what I noticed in a lot of teachings where people just point to staying in awareness, because most people are cut off from the body, staying in awareness for them is actually a mental exercise. It's not a somatic radiant exercise until the heart is open. And many of the things that I share are ways to open the heart because it is a science and you can indeed open the heart by putting your attention on it. But what I noticed was that many teachers teaching, stay in the self, capital S, right? Just stay in that, everything else is not real. When I would tune into them and would notice their mannerisms and feel their psychic energy, I noticed that they were full of neuroses, OCDs, neurotic patterns that have not been healed. When in my experience, I'm not saying that my experience is the right experience, but my experience, which is the only thing I can really talk about, is that awakening, and specifically the energy of Kundalini, has transmuted my psyche so that the ray of light, right, so that but that consciousness can radiate through all of my being without distortion, right? And I believe in Kabbalah, there's a term called tikkun, right, which is the healing of the fragments of ourselves. And that's very much what has happened. What Kundalini has done in my life is it has brought spirit to planet Earth in my presence, in my physical expression, in my psyche. It has changed my psyche from disempowered beliefs into loving beliefs, into not even beliefs, into knowledge. It has transmuted every limited belief, and there's more. It's still operating for the rest of my life. But what it is doing, it is transforming any unloving or limited belief into knowledge of oneness, into knowledge of godness, into knowledge of divinity. So self-inquiry, right? It takes on many forms. When I first had a huge opening with Kundalini, I spent 2 years, much like a familiar teacher that many people know. I spent 2 years in bliss, not feeling any energy of desire. I was just in bliss, and there were still thoughts and feelings arising, but within bliss, these things were arising, and they would, right? Many of them would dissolve. However, what took place 2 years later is that Kundalini began whipping through my chakra system, purging content, cleaning out content. And the fact of the matter is, for most people, when that much content is purged from your psyche, from your chakra system, staying in the I am presence simply is not an option at all times. No matter what power of concentration you have, and it might be possible for some people, but what it showed me was that it was teaching me automatically, right? The process of cleaning out the chakra system taught me different qualities that I had to cultivate as in my soul's evolution. For example, instead of being an empath and receiving all of the vibrations and discerning all of the vibrations of the universe and being so aware of my environment, which is very lunar, very feminine, right? To cultivate the healthy, radiant energy, the male principle, to create energy, to actually radiate the song of my soul through my heart into my environment instead of merely perceiving my environment, right? Both of those aspects, the male and the female, are expressing fully. So I talk about, tuning into frequencies, because the thing about many teachings, at least in my experience, the way that I experienced them and understood them and the way my psyche processed them, is that if you take a pointer like remain in awareness, you could stay very disconnected from the body mind, right? From the subconscious. And if you want to raise the vibration of the body mind, then you must transmute the subconscious. And sometimes, like I said, understanding it, yes, it only is useful up until a certain point, but I'm not talking about mental understanding, because that pattern of being stuck in a child's perspective that is always stuck in a situation, always manipulative, always controlling, that pattern is more complex than one singular emotion. And so just remaining in the I am awareness, if you are interacting intimately with many people in your life, these patterns are going to play out because there is something to see about them so that you can unhook from them. Sometimes you have to understand something. You have to see the pattern that you're in order to be able to make contact with the energy that creates the pattern. So if I have a pattern of disassociating from my body when I feel helpless, right? But all that's playing out is that I disassociate from my body, and then maybe my body goes into autopilot behaviors, like maybe binging, maybe some addictive behavior, maybe numbing out. That's a whole pattern happening. And yes, you can try to stay in the I am awareness, but for many people, disassociation is extremely strong. And so actually understanding that it's a strategy that your ego uses to keep you safe makes you believe that you can somatically change it, that you can that it's not something that is just there that you have to witness. It's something that can be changed because it is a strategy that you are doing on purpose, right? So if I let myself see that I am disassociating, maybe even when I'm bored, right? I just float right out of my body, and then I numb out, and then I go into autopilot. If I see that happening, if I understand that that's a reaction to feeling helpless, right? If I have a pattern of rejecting my own needs, that will very often look like a domino effect of reactions. So I'll disassociate from my body will go into chaotic addictive behavior. And so people try to say, well, just stay in the I am presence. Well, I'm reporting to you what it actually looks like in real life, at least how it has looked like for me. Me, a Western person who interacts frequently with family of origin, intimate relationships, money, business, right? Things that tend to trigger people. And so I'm always being exposed to my limiting beliefs. And it is absolutely incredibly important to be able to say, well, I see that I tend to recruit people in my outer world, right? I tend to choose partners and situations that I can manipulate because I don't believe I can create. That is not a thought and feeling that you can just be present with. That is a pattern. So when you see the pattern, right, when you're in the observer and you say, oh, well, I notice that I have this stressful dump of chemicals when I'm in this relationship, and I notice that I'm censoring my behavior in order to get something from the outer world. Why? Because I don't believe I can create it. When I see that that whole pattern is based on a belief, that seeing instantaneously unhooks you. And so when I speak about self-inquiry and about understanding something, it's a somatic realization. It's an in-the-moment awareness. It is not saying, oh, when I was a child, this happened, and therefore this is who I am now. It's as it is occurring, witnessing the pattern and seeing what that sponsoring belief is that creates the whole domino effect of chaos. So I encourage everybody to study what they resonate with, to appreciate deeply all of the masters that have come before us, Jesus, the Buddha, and so many others, Ramana Maharshi. However, do not ignore reality as it is expressing through you. Awakening is happening through you, and what it will call from your life is a very nuanced thing. It's very nuanced. The definition of self-inquiry will evolve and change on a moment-to-moment basis. Sometimes you can sit with an emotion and dissolve it completely. Sometimes there are so many thoughts, feelings, and patterns jumbled in together that you have to unpack it a little bit in order to make contact with the original energy that created that reaction pattern. That's the truth. That's the truth in my experience, where the awakening is penetrating the psyche at a very deep level, right? A transfiguration of the psyche so that it is no longer creating distortions. And granted, my mind does create distortions, but the energy of awakening heals the distortions. And part of that process for me has been to see how I get hooked and distracted by different trickster energies, different body-mind addictions, right? The way that the body-mind tries to unseat us like an animal, like an unbridled animal, right? By complaining, by getting itchy, by disassociating, by staying in a manipulative energy, by trying to change people, right? That's all strategies of the body-mind. And sometimes just being so intensely present with something dissolves it. Sometimes there's more excavation needed. Sometimes something is so familiar to someone, confusion is so familiar to someone that they might think they're in the I am presence, but they're actually in a haze of confusion. Sometimes people think they're in the I am presence and they're in a completely mental state of disassociation. Sometimes people think they're feeling joy when they're actually feeling stressed. So I talk a lot about creating the contrast, right? A lot of people that practice that form of self-inquiry that is defined by maybe Advaita Vedantins, I don't know, just take every thought and feeling back to its source. The thing is, if your heart isn't open, that's going to be a very mental exercise, meaning it might feel to you that you're dissolving things, but you're actually disassociating from things. And so in order to truly transmute the subconscious, we have to put our awareness below the neck, right? To be aware of what's going on in the body, because if we are aware of what's going on in the body and then we meditate on love, we need the contrast not only of the observer, right, which is one quality of the soul. We need the contrast of love, because when you focus on love and you go and meditate on whatever love that you can access, whether it's the love of my pet, that nurturing, loving, blissful appreciation, however you can access it and expand it in your awareness, that awareness of love will create enough contrast for you to be able to see what is not love, what is manipulation, what is control. Otherwise, it's so familiar to you because it's 95% of your operating system that you will not see it. You can't observe it. You can't observe a level of energy that you have not gone beyond. And how do you go beyond it? One way, one step, one dimension is observation, and another dimension or doorway is expanding your awareness of the feeling of love in the heart chakra. So not only love, right, but also freedom. If you practice the vibration of freedom, it will be obvious to you when you are behaving in ways that indicate that you believe you're in bondage, like choosing things that don't feel good to you, like marrying people, dating people, being friends with people that are actually cruel to you or that aren't kind to you, making choices that are not in alignment with your heart because you believe you're obligated to do so, or you believe you need something in the external world to make up for a lack within you that doesn't exist. So I just wanted to define self-inquiry from my perspective. And to reiterate, right, I am not really a teacher. I'm just relaying my experience. I'm not a philosopher. I don't have any concern for like what anybody else says. What I'm concerned with is reality and the way that the reality of awakening is playing out with me. And I'm sharing any gems and insights and explanations that occur to me, you know, for whatever they're worth. So if you are wanting to learn like a formal philosophy or some teaching that has been taught for hundreds of years, much of that might be coming out of my mouth because I'm channeling it from my life, but I cannot teach. I don't know even what the Eightfold Path is. I remember some of the limbs, but I can't explain somebody else's words. That has escaped me totally because the universe wants to express through me in its own unique way. So I hope this is helpful, and I hope you have a beautiful day.